What is going on, gunfighters? Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, ammunition, all manner of things, the right way, with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. Today, more specifically, we're going to be talking about the 7.62 Tokarev, or 7.62 by 25. A pretty cool zippy little round. That's what we're going to narrow in on today. And some of the guns that fire it. I'm going to put in a quick abbreviated version of the bio, and then we'll get into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. All right, the 7.62 by 25 Tokarev. That's what we're going to talk about. To give credit where it's due, a primary source for this is going to be a Cartridges of the World manual that I have that was given as a gift by a patron. And a special thank you to that person. They know who they are if they're listening. I appreciate that. The 7.62 by 25 Tokarev was the official Soviet pistol cartridge adopted in 1930. So if you think of this as like a Cold War cartridge, it goes back quite a bit farther than that. I'm interjecting here from what Cartridges of the World says, but 1930, that's quite a ways back. That's in the interwar period between the Great War and World War II. Quite a bit farther than the Cold War, certainly. Back to the manual. For the Tokarev model TT30 and modified model TT33 automatic pistols. The pistols are a basic Browning type design, similar to the Colt 45's auto pistol. However, these incorporate many original features to simplify manufacturing processes and must be considered an advance over Browning's original patented design. These pistols often have a crude finish but are well made and of excellent design. These have a 4.5-inch barrel and a magazine capacity of 8 rounds. Large quantities have been sold as military surplus. Skipping ahead a little bit here in this manual. The Chinese began exporting both pistols and ammunition to the United States in 1987 at very reasonable prices. Interjecting here, maybe that's why I consider it kind of a Cold War era handgun and pistol, because it came to us in large quantities in the late 80s. This cartridge is very similar in dimension to the 7.63 30 Mauser, and most rounds of Mauser ammunition can be fired in the Tokarev pistol. The 7.62mm Tokarev is a fair field cartridge for small game, with a good velocity and flat trajectory, but needs soft point bullets for maximum effectiveness. The hand loader can use loading data for the 7.63 Mauser. The Speer 30 caliber plinker bullet of 100 grains make a good hunting bullet. But because it is slightly heavier than the standard weight, it must be loaded to lower velocity. Chinese and Russian ammunition are steel cased and Berdan primed with corrosive primers. Such ammunition is not reloadable. Alright, so that is some of what the Cartridges of the World book has to say. But what do the numbers say? What is this actually compared to in modern terms? Well, it's a little bit unique in that it's a bottlenecked, fairly high velocity pistol round. If we look at some velocities that are listed here in Cartridges of the World, we get an 86 grain at 1390, and it says duplicate factory ball. 86 grains at 1390. It also lists an 87 grain FMJ at 1390, factory load. And it lists that you could fire the 30 Mauser in it There are a variety of loadings listed for that. That cartridge, I do believe, goes all the way back to the 1800s. But if we look at listings for that, it goes all the way from the quite pedestrian 86 grains at 1160 to 86 grains at 1410, and that's a factory loading list for the 30 Mauser. Now, how does this compare? Those are just numbers. How does it compare to common rounds? Well, the most common round that's fairly comparable, I would say, let's look at the 380, because you get some loadings in the 85-ish grains to 90 grain. You can go a little bit heavier, but if we want to see how it compares to that, if I'm looking here in the same manual, Cartridges of the World, I'm looking at 85 grain jacketed hollow point, factory load at 1,000 feet a second. That's quite a bit shy of the 13-ish 100 feet a second, 1,300 plus feet a second. That's 1,000 feet a second. That's right around the speed of sound. That's much slower than the 13 something. And I see a jacketed hollow point load, a reload of a 90 grain at 900. So looking at that 85 at 1,000, that's a good couple of numbers to work with there. So quite a bit spicier, quite a bit zippier than the 380, which is a pretty common defensive cartridge. Let's look at it compared to some other less common, but I wouldn't by any means call them esoteric, defensive rounds here in the U.S. The 32 H&R Magnum, decent little round, was chambered in a decent carry gun, the Smith & Wesson J-frame. And if we look there, we got an 85 grain jacketed hollow point at 900. So again, quite a bit less than the old 7.62 Tokarev. It does list quite a spicier load there. Buffalo bore. And if you know Buffalo bore, they're kind of known for pushing the envelope. We see them with an 85 grain at 1,300. That's hot, but that's still less than the 7.62 Tokarev. A little bit less in grain weight, but a little bit less in velocity too, so in both metrics, less than the 7.62 Tokarev. Now, a few years later, there was an even spicier 327 that came out, the 327 Federal Magnum. It's got its own little niche market. It's still hanging on. It's not 380 popular, but it's not hard to find, and there are quite a few weapons chambered in it. If we look there, we see a factory load 85 grain jacketed hollow point at 1,400 feet a second. That one right there is right on par. If we look at that, that's pretty close. We're looking at the mid-13s to a 1,400 feet a second load. But remember, the Tokarev had a slightly heavier bullet. So can we call that pretty comparable? We have to jump up to the 327 Federal Magnum to get comparable numbers to the old 1930s Soviet 7.62 Tokarev. Now there are some spicier loads for the 327 Federal Magnum. It does list a 115 grain Spear Gold Dot at 1,300. That's certainly more powerful. There's also a listing for a 100 grain jacketed hollow point at 1,450. Those are more powerful. But again, you have to get all the way up into a pretty new load. Well into the 21st century loads of that similar grain weight to beat it. Now, different philosophy. I was trying to look at comparable bullet grain weights. Certainly a whole different philosophy than 45 ACP, which is a 230 grain bullet at right around, let's say, 850 to 950 feet a second. 230 grain versus 80 something grain. And mid 1300s to 850 to 950 feet a second. That's a big difference in philosophy. That's like a Porsche versus a freight train. What are you trying to do? Both bullets obviously will kill, but do you want a light projectile with high velocity, or do you want a much more massive projectile chugging along at a respectable velocity? Now, the Tokarev pistols are cool, and they're very much in line with a lot of other Russian-made stuff. Russians are known, and I think rightfully so, for making good, rugged military hardware. The Tokarev pistol, especially a well-made one, I would say a Russian one. I don't know how well the Chinese ones are made. We think of Chinese stuff as being cheap, but usually that's stuff that they're selling to us. Stuff that they make for themselves, maybe a pretty good quality. A lot of their older military rifles and stuff are quite good. So the pistols are probably rugged and well made. When it comes to small arms to kill people, the communist countries are pretty well known for making pretty robust systems. I don't know what to extrapolate or to read into that or not, but it just seems to be true. Look at the AK-47. The Tokarev handgun is almost certainly a well-made, rugged handgun. I'm semi-familiar with them. I'm not a gun collector. This is gunfighter life. But I imagine many people have found themselves on the wrong end of a 7.62 Tokarev. So it's certainly an effective gun and round. I would not, and I am not recommending you get rid of your Glock 19 and carry a Tokarev. I'm not recommending that at all. But maybe you're a gun collector. Maybe you're into Cold War hardware or World War II type hardware. Or maybe you're trying to broaden your horizons from the black guns, the AR-15 and the Glock 19, and you just want to understand more. Hopefully this has been enlightening to you. I think the round is certainly capable. It would be cool if more people made a little bit more modern, better defensive ammunition for it. I tried to look up. I couldn't find any readily available good factory defensive loaded ammo. Something like they mentioned with a 100 grain Spear Gold Dot. That would be probably a pretty effective defensive round. But I don't know why you would go through all the trouble to get that and have all that. Maybe it's just what you have. Maybe you inherited it or got a really good deal on one from a buddy that didn't want it. I'd say it's certainly a capable handgun and a capable round. It's a cool, zippy little round. Probably ahead of its time. Now, if you like that concept of the zippy, let's call it the zippy little round, you get some other choices that might be more practical in a modern carry gun. We mentioned a 327 Federal. Also, the 357 SIG, did a whole podcast episode on that. And that's basically a 10mm. A lot of people would think a 40, but I don't think you can resize a 40. You can resize a 10mm, cut it and resize it. Anyway, it's a 40 size cartridge, necked down to 9mm. I know it's called the 357 SIG, but it's actually .355, not .357 diameter, so it's actually 9mm bullet. But the 357 SIG is a capable, modern round. It was kind of in vogue for a little while. It started to fall out of favor. It never was a super popular round, but it used to be, I think, more popular than it is today. You might find some good deals on those on the used market, and certainly in a lot more modern handguns. I do believe for a time the Gen 1 Smith & Wesson M&Ps were chambered in it. The SIG 226 and the SIG 226 Legion chambered in it. I have one on my hip right now, although I converted it to 9mm, but I know they came in 357 SIG because I bought one. Glocks and 357 SIG. If you're looking for that zippy round. If you like the zippy round concept and you want to go a little bit smaller, there is the 32 North American Arms, which is kind of unique in its own right, a 380 neck down to 32 caliber. Not as powerful, 60 grain at 1.222 it has listed here, Corbon factory load. But the gun that it's chambered in, I think it's only chambered in the NAA guns, is very, very small. Like micro carry gun, may even be overstating its size. They are tiny little guns. So you got some options if you like that zippy round concept. Certainly a cool cartridge, and I thought worthy of an episode. With that said, I don't know what kind of listener you are to the podcast. If this is your one time tuning in, like you just were looking, you were just searching for an episode on 7.62x25 Tokarev, and you just want to listen to this episode for free, by all means. If you come back over and over again, you regularly listen, I consider you part of the tribe. A tribe of gunfighters, a tribe of men that care about this stuff, where we have something in common. I am humbled and I appreciate you tuning in. If you don't have the means to support and don't want to, that's fine. If you want to be a more active participant in the tribe, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can simply share this or any other episode you think a buddy might be into. It's free to share it. Feel free to share it with as many people as you want to. Also, hopefully you are already liked, subscribed, following the show. You can leave a review or answer a question on there. If you really want to be a part of the Insider Tribe, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get all kinds of insider content. and you get to be an active participant of the tribe instead of just a passive listener. If that interests you, you want to support this show. American, veteran operated, small business, employees number 1, the guy talking to you. That's something you want to support. You want to be an active part of this tribe. Consider becoming a patron. Should be a link in the show notes. With that, as a thank you for listening, the tactical tip of the day. This one is also a free resource. I don't have any affiliation with this company other than I like their products and I shoot quite a few Rugers. But it was done by Ruger and for free, much like this podcast is put out for free. At least free for you to listen to, not free for production, but free for you to listen to. Ruger did a whole series on tactical tips. Ruger's Tactical Tips. You can go, I think, on the Ruger website and find them. You can probably find them free on YouTube. But there's some good information. I don't agree 100% with really any other person I know on firearms and training, but I agree a lot with what they have to say. So if you're looking for some free, good visual training aids, I don't think you should replace actual hands-on training and instruction, but it's a good free resource. And it's been on there for years and years and years. Ruger's Tactical Tips. With that, the tactical verse of the day. From the book of Leviticus, you will chase your enemies and they shall fall by the sword before you. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. Your enemies shall fall by the sword before you. Let's not mischaracterize the Lord God Almighty. The Lord of Hosts. You may see that often in your Bible, the Lord of Hosts. That might not mean anything to you. That means the God of angel armies. Exodus 15, the Lord is a man of war. The Lord is a man of war. Many mighty men in the Bible, men of faith, righteous men, were also men of war. There is no contradiction there, and don't feel like there has to be one. Stand up and be a man. If you're called to be a warrior, be one. For you are made in the image of God, and the Lord is a man of war. With that, thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.